Good afternoon. Welcome to the RTS Futures webinar entitled TV's Global Game. I am reliably informed there's 100 of you or so or more in the audience, so it's a great pleasure to welcome you to this event in slightly strange circumstances as we've all got used to over the last few months. My name is John Elms. I am the chair of this panel, and I'm the international editor at TV Trade Magazine Broadcast. It is a pleasure to join you on this afternoon, and I have a very illustrious panel to introduce. So I'm just going to introduce them before getting them to talk a little bit about themselves. So we have with us on this panel today to talk about distribution, Laura St. Clair, who is the Vice President of Global Format Sales for Sony Pictures Television. Laura's going to give a quick wave. Yeah, there she is. We have Jess Singleton, who is the Senior Sales Manager for TV in UK and Ireland at Studio Canal. And last but not least, we have Daniel Thomas, who is the Acquisition Manager at UK TV. Yes. So before we go on to the actual discussion, can I just get a brief introduction from the panelists probably in that order is probably sensible, about, tell us what you do and how you found your way into distribution. Laura.
Yeah, hi. I am VP of Global Formats here at Sony. I've been with Sony for over 10 years now. I started off in production, actually. That's always what I wanted to do. TV production, moved into a sort of a sports marketing role, and then missed TV, so came back and find myself at an indie called Celador, and they look after, they came up with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So I was part of the team that rolled that out, helped to roll that out internationally in a supporting role. And eventually I've ended up here at Sony, where we look after the exploitation really of over 100 formats, and our main drive is unscripted, and so we look after Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Dragon's Den, but we're competing with the brands like Strictly Come Dancing, X Factor, Got Talent, Love Island. So it's a really crowded marketplace, so we really have to fight for our position, but we're well placed. We've got some great brands to exploit, and it's my job to make sure we do that properly.
Sure. And Jess?
Hi, it's great to be here. A little bit about my background. I've always worked in sales throughout my working life. I worked in retail while I was at school and at uni, and I've always really thrived in situations which require you to, build personal relationships. And like most salespeople, I would consider myself a people person. And I started out in the industry as a sales coordinator working for ITV in their satellite office in Sydney in Australia, which is where I'm from. And from there, I worked my way up. I spent 8 years with ITV in sales and distribution. And during that time, I was relocated to London to the headquarters here, where I initially managed the global sales administration for the business. And then I wanted to get closer to the business commercially. So I started doing, a small deal here, a small deal there, which eventually led to me selling to the UK and Ireland in a full-time role. And then last year I left ITV to join Studio Canal and enter the world of not only feature films, but also premium drama, where I now manage sales to the broadcasters here in the UK and in Ireland.
Brilliant, fantastic. And Dan?
Hi, so I'm Acquisitions Manager at UK TV, and I am responsible for the acquisitions across 4 of our channels. So Dave, Gold, W, and Yesterday. I always wanted to work in TV, and for me, when I was looking at going to university, the only real option for me at the time, because TV was first centred in London, was to come to university in London, which is what I did. I then, with the last scraps of my student learning, my final year, did a 3-month unpaid internship at a production company. From there, that gave me lots of opportunities where the first paid job I got was a 3-month trip to Greece to film a travel program for SBS, which is an Australian broadcaster, kind of the equivalent of BBC Two. And then from there, that gave me lots of opportunities. You meet people and you can get extra jobs and et cetera, which led me on to then starting UK TV 6 years ago. And I've been there since.
Fantastic. So just as a kind of overview, we have two sides of the distribution landscape. We have Laura and Jess who are on the sales side, and then we have their kind of the person who sits on the other side of the table in Dan, who acquires programming. And that's the kind of getting the full gamut of the distribution landscape. I think we're going to start with non-scripted with you, Laura. Obviously,
Sure.
you mentioned in your introduction you look after some really quite recognizable brands like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and Dragon's Den, which I'm hoping many of the audience will have at least watched in some guise.
Hope so.
You obviously overseeing the rollout of those shows worldwide and sales of those shows worldwide. How do these big formats take off elsewhere around the world, and how do you keep the brand alive in and going in the world with these shows that are, some of which I think Millionaire is over 20 years old?
You're right. Yes, exactly. It's a really exciting job because you are working with broadcasters across the globe. And just to be really clear, what you're doing is selling the right for the other countries to make their own local versions. So when you're doing that, whilst we know that, if for the UK, you have 15 questions, you have 3 lifelines, etc. We have Jeremy Clarkson hosting, and that's how it works in the UK. We have to think of different ways of making that work for broadcasters who have either less money, or they have different schedules, or they have different priorities. And we have to adapt to those circumstances. So for us with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, it's always been about how do we protect the brand values and the sort of the elevator pitch, which is people come on to test their general knowledge over a series of 15 questions to win a life-changing amount of money. That's really all it is. So how do we play with that to keep the brand together, but allow local versions to really explore how to make it work in their territories? So we've done all sorts of things. We've introduced different lifelines. We've played around with having live events. A great example is somewhere like India, which people know probably from the movie Slumdog Millionaire, which is loosely based on a real life event. So there we've got a big Bollywood host. We had to mess with the logo a little bit so that it was more purple and it reflected cultural norms in India. We've done brand integrations there. We even did sort of dancing shows and a lot more chat. So we do play around with that, and we've also done sort of daily versions as well. So it involves quite a lot of creativity within the constraints of the brand.
Mm. And you touched on it, just going into that in more granular detail. You mentioned kind of the things that have to be done globally to keep the original brand consistent across the globe. I mean, what are the most important things that you feel that you have to convey to local broadcasters when they buy these formats from Sony?
Yeah, so I mean, when we go in my job is to go and meet people like Dan and his equivalents across the globe. So I go in with my local sales office, and our job is to pitch the show, but to a particular broadcaster for a particular reason. So we know who the audience is for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. We know that because of all the data we've collected. So it's about saying this is why it would work in this particular slot, in this particular way, whether it's a 60-minute show or even in some territories like Turkey where it's 3 hours. And in some it's 25 minutes. So it's about knowing how you're going to pitch that. And also, what local talent are you going to use down from the, and that could be the on-screen talent. So who's your presenter, who's your Clarkson or Jimmy Kimmel, to who is your production company that is the best at this in your country, and working with them on that, as well as the questions. So there's a huge amount of detail that we would go into in order to persuade a broadcaster to come on board with us. And the reason that they would choose to do that is that it cuts out, if you take a recognizable brand, it's a shortcut to getting, you cut out all the risk of development. You cut out, we provide a Bible, that's essentially what you're buying, and that's the how do you do this, what are all the pitfalls that you overcome, and and when you do your first series, you cut out all of that waste of time, money and resources that you would otherwise have to go through to get a show up and running. And what's more, it's less risky because you've got proven track record in other countries that you can back up your decision to take this show above something else.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we'll just we'll go on. We'll have a lot more conversations about non-scripted before long. Just quickly to interject, a couple of you have asked about the video sizzle freezing from you, Will. I'm going to chat with the people at RTS and see if we can get maybe that sent to those people who signed up for the webinar, and so they can have a kind of a look at what formats you sell. So onto scripted, Jess. Now, you know, non-scripted is obviously a massive part of TV, but I don't think with the rise of, you know, global streamers such as Netflix, drama has really, and scripted programming has really kind of come across and upped its popularity, so much so that in the last decade we've described it as the golden age of TV drama. I just wanted to get your perspective on kind of the international drama trends that you've noticed. Obviously, we have great drama in the UK, and that travels abroad, but also there is a tendency, and now through those platforms, for international to come the other way. I just want to get your understanding of how you view the international drama market at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, certainly, as you say, the past decade, you know, can be described as the golden age of TV drama. And we are seeing, you know, huge success for British-made drama that's being sold around the world. And, you know, for us at Studio Canal, a big success story has been the series Years and Years, which was commissioned by the BBC here and made by Red Productions, written by, you know, the wonderful Russell T Davies and starring Emma Thompson and Russell Tovey, which we have sold into 159 territories, you know, around the world within its first year of distribution, which is, you know, it's really fantastic, and it proves the strength of British-made drama in an international market. And I think what really sits at the heart of the Studio Canal business certainly is, you know, premium European drama. And being, you know, a European studio, we're headquartered in Paris. So telling European stories in languages other than English, it's really part of our DNA and, you know, who we are as a distributor. So I guess what makes an international drama a success here in the UK, it comes down to, you know, high quality storytelling, universal themes, and characters which audiences can relate to in terms of emotions or lived experiences, irrespective of the language. And, you know, we are seeing, as you say, small shifts, you know, not only in the global marketplace, but here in the UK towards European and non-English language drama. And, you know, at the moment, there certainly is a bit of a halo effect, you know, when a great piece of content like the film Parasite comes along that really breaks through to the mainstream. It shows how audiences can, you know, jump over that perceived barrier of subtitles when the right piece of content comes along.
I mean, you've touched on it there, and we could use the UK as an example, because obviously the UK shows travel, as you said, about Years and Years, which was obviously a very big ticket show for the BBC last year. I watched it, of course, and it sold well around the world. Using the UK as an example, how do you know what shows will resonate where? You mentioned subtitling and I suppose receptiveness within a country to subtitling, but what kind of things help a drama, Studio Canal drama, say, cut through in an international market, using the UK as an example?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us a great example of European drama that really has cut through is the TV series Spiral, which is a French premium crime drama, resonates with a UK audience, and in this case, it has cut through. You know, and yes, it's set in France and the French judicial system, but its themes and its characters translate, and it plays out that recipe for success with the stories and the characters, you know, finding their way into the viewers' minds.
Yeah, so that was I think my internet broke up, or someone's internet broke up. These are the vagaries that we have to play with in this Zoom environment. But you said that was Spiral, which was as you say, a French crime series, which was on BBC Four and is about to come into Series 8, I believe, in the UK. I mean, it clearly has resonated well with the UK audience, and it's down to its universal themes and relatable characters. Is that the main thrust?
Yeah, I think there's a strong heritage in this country of, you know, really strong crime drama. And Spiral, even though it's set in, you know, a different judicial system in a different country, those themes have really translated over into the UK, and it has found, you know, a really solid audience here.
Sure. And just before I go on to Dan, who's going to tell us about kind of the shows that he might buy from Jessica or Laura, what are the other things you've noticed in global drama as some kind of holistic trends? Obviously, it's still a massive part of the kind of the content that the world consumes, driven by the Amazons, the Netflixes, and the HBO Maxes of the world. What do you feel is kind of changing in the industry?
I think, yeah, that's a really good question. I think what we've seen a shift, you know, of recent years that has, you know, brought us some success is, you know, talent off screen, being able to secure, you know, really, you know, A-level, A-list kind of talent and bringing them back into TV. And that's certainly part of the recipe for years and years. And, you know, being able to secure Emma Thompson in that in the BBC, but it enabled us to get Canal Plus on board, and, you know, it changes the distribution model, and, you know, it really transformed that show into the fantastic piece of TV that it is.
Sure, absolutely. It's really pertinent that you say talent. Someone like Emma Thompson, as Laura mentioned, also talent from the formats that you sold, very important. And I'm sure Dan will agree that, you know, this part of the considerations that you make in acquisitions, about, you know, whether you take a show in terms of the talent that's attached. I just want to get your perspective, Dan. Obviously, you've got a quite broad remit at UK TV. Just give us a rundown of what you specifically cover at UK TV, and kind of the things that you're likely to see from being sent your way from distributors.
So yeah, we're a network of 7 channels, and I look after 4 of those, as I mentioned earlier. And there's a few different kind of categories of how I would define content and how they come to us. So we take some second run UK content. So look at Dave, and we have Top Gear, and we have Would I Lie to You, etc. Look at a channel like Gold, which is almost 99% UK archive, classic nostalgic content. So you'll see Mrs. Brown's Boys and Vicar of Dibley and Early Fuzz and Horses, etc. The other, the next kind of bucket of or place where we acquire content from is from international programming. So we have MasterChef USA on W, and we have One Born Every Minute Australia on W. And we also acquire quite a bit of international drama. So we've just announced that we've acquired a series called Why Women Kill, which is from the makers of Desperate Housewives. I don't know if lots of people on here may not have watched Desperate Housewives, given that it's probably started 15 or 20 years ago now. Which stars Lucy Liu, which kind of feeds into what you were saying, Jess, about the fact that leading people and stars are really important to draw people in, particularly on networks like ours, where we use those stars in order to bring an audience in, to kind of market assure that people will know this is going to be a good series because of the talent that's attached to it. And the last area that is the part of my job that I enjoy the most is what we call pre-sales. So they're kind of like a co-production. So lots of broadcasters around the world will come together and put money into an idea and all kind of develop that idea concurrently and make it work for their individual channel. Now, I've got 2 clips, but I don't know if they're going to work or if we're going to risk. I don't know what you think, John, whether we're going to risk showing them one more.
I'm an eternal optimist, so shall we risk it, and then I'll take the flak if it fails, and we can go from there. I think we should try and run the clips, and then of course I'll discuss with the RTS about making sure that the audience can see these clips. So yes, if you'd like to just quickly introduce them, Dan.
So yeah, this is a series called Underground Worlds, which went out on yesterday this year. And it also then Discovery Science in the US were also a partner on that. And so we worked kind of side by side and getting a program that was essentially the same, but made a little bit more specific for our audiences. In the US, it's much more about the conspiracy and the mystery and a bit more over the top than what our yesterday British audience would expect from that, which is a bit more methodical, a bit more laid back, a bit more into the detail. But yeah, I've got kind of the promo for both of the channels, if they work, to kind of see the difference, basically.
Brilliant. Well, we'll have a look and see if they do. Touch wood.
You've got a sense that the first video almost worked, but then you just heard like the short clip from the second one where it gives you a sense of the voiceover and the music and everything, which will give you, an idea of how the program tonally was made slightly different for the 2 broadcasters. And that's the fun part of my job, that I can influence the way that a program is made from that very top level and from a channel level. Whereas there's maybe an assumption that you need to work in production in order to do those things, but being a broadcaster, we can work from the very beginning and kind of dictate the direction of a program to make it work for us.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, that's an interesting part. You mentioned that you've got 3 buckets of how you buy programming for your various channels, and obviously channels with the channel controller will have, very specific remits for what they want. In terms of how your strategy has changed, has it altered somewhat in terms of that everyone's getting more used to global content, as Jess pointed out? Has that like shifted the focus on what these channels want, what you can get through onto those different channels?
I mean, I should also point out that we also commission content, which are UK TV originals, where we fully own the IP and we take the idea from beginning to end. So what my job is just to acquire finished programs and to do, as I said, pre-sales. But yes, this kind of move into a pre-sale market is, lots of broadcasters globally are doing this. It's in response to global SVOD players, that linear channels like us, we need to be able to club together and all kind of make programs together in response to Netflix and Amazon Prime, who can just who are their own global network and can just put in the money in order to secure the whole world. So yeah, absolutely.
Sure, absolutely. That's an interesting part. I just wanted to, and for the audience members, those clips freezing is proof that even in the TV world, technology sometimes fails us a little bit. So don't get too disheartened. It's perfectly natural for this new normal that we're living in. I think I just want to, now that we've had insights from all panelists about what they do individually and sitting either side of the table, so to speak, as in this kind of situation, I just want to get some insights, some anecdotes from the panel about what your tactics have been from the distribution side. Perhaps Jess and Laura, you can go first.
Sure.
Kind of tactics that you've employed and harnessed to be able to sell a show or format to a broadcaster. I don't know who wants to go first. Shall we go with Laura?
Sure.
What kind of tactics? Yeah.
Well, I've talked a little bit about Millionaire in India, but the other show that we also look after is Dragon's Den, which I'm not sure many people are aware, is actually started life as a Japanese game show before it was picked up by the BBC 18 years ago. And the biggest hurdle we faced when selling that was the attitude and very legitimate attitude from the broadcasters that we were pitching to. It's like, yeah, it's a business show. Shows don't work in prime time. It's not, it's just a niche show. It's got a niche audience. And we really struggled with that because the public service broadcaster like the BBC has certain tonality to it that is quite hard for commercial channels to see beyond. So the big game changer for us was we did a deal in the US where we remade Dragon's Den, called it Shark Tank, and we gave it a much glossier feel. We tapped into the reality, and the reality is in Dragon's Den is that you're watching a life-changing moment for real. The whole point of Unscripted and why people love it and why it drives conversation and primetime schedules around the world is that what you see is authentic. It's not, that's what people love about it. And actually the heart of Dragon's Den is a life-changing moment when someone gets offered a reward for all the hard work and effort that they put in that can change their life. And actually that's what ABC in the US did amazingly well. So we were able to take that show and actually we sold that tape, as we would say, the finished episodes, to a number of countries, and they went, oh yeah, no, that does ring with our viewers. Now that works for us. So actually, when you look at different versions of Dragon's Den around the world, we now have Shark Tank and Lion's Den in Africa, for instance. They all use the commercial channels tend to go to more of the glossier, upbeat, the reality feel a little bit more than the Dragon's Den that we know and love on the BBC, but it's completely the same show and it has the same sentiment and the same brand values. So we've kept that together. That's probably the best example for me of how we have to do that.
Sure, and going to Jess, I think it's quite pertinent, a quote from BBC's head of entertainment, Kate Phillips, when she was in the sales side in BBC Worldwide, as it was formerly known as, it's now known as BBC Studios, the BBC's commercial arm. She said that she once used the tape of Gogglebox, people on Gogglebox reacting to the BBC drama Dr. Foster and their reactions at a specific scene live to that as a selling technique to broadcasters to pick up Dr. Foster, which is a whole kind of meta TV tactic. What kind of things have you employed potentially to sell programming?
Yeah, it's a great story from Kate and the team, and it's like very creative, selling techniques. I like that. I might steal it. But in terms of my my experience, I think that it's in sales it's great to give your clients an experience. I think I lost you.
Yeah, we've you've broken up slightly. It's great to give clients. I don't know who's
okay.
it is.
It's great to give them an experience and a way to interact with the content, kind of beyond just reading a script or reading a treatment or screening the episodes. So whether that's like experiential marketing or something like a set visit, whereby you can take the buyers on set to see the scenes being filmed, to meet the talent, which is particularly great if you've got some A-list talent on set, and to speak to the producers and to the director about their vision for the show. I think that these type of experiences can help buyers to see how special a show is and to get that glimpse behind the curtain and see how the sausage is made.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I can imagine that being on set and meeting with talent is quite important. From your side of the table, Dan, what kind of, might be nice to know what kind of tactics distributors have tried to put on you, but what kind of things are you looking for in when selecting a show, and the kind of things that help not sweeten the deal, that's not the description, but like really put that over the line? Because obviously I understand that you have to convince a fair amount of people above you to get a program so that it can air on your channel. So give us an insight into how that process goes.
We have quite defined channels that are looking for very specific types of content. So it's an easy job when people are pitching into me that something would either be possibly right for us or be wrong for us. That on Dave, you know exactly what you want. It's a comedy entertainment channel, slightly male skewed, looking for like a 16 to 44 age bracket. It's quite if there's talent attached that's relevant for the channel, amazing. Similar with yesterday, it's a history and factual channel. We know exactly what works in the channel, we know what doesn't. So it's I tend to know quite quickly whether I will be interested in taking a program or not. What I then have to do is, if I like a program, then have to essentially repitch that internally to a number of people in order for me. And I'm not the only person who makes the decision. There's a number of people who make the decision as to whether to take a program on a channel or not. So then, I effectively have to repitch then internally to get sign off in order to acquire a program.
Sure, absolutely. And I think it might be worth, given that we are in such an unprecedented circumstance, to see how recent business for you, the panel, has kind of panned out, or what things have been changed, what you've done to make sure that in this time when we're all locked down and sitting in our homes on via Zoom call rather than in a conference theatre, what kind of stuff that you've done, and what shows maybe have been particularly on your radar for selling. Laura, if you want to perhaps start off with that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think in these new circumstances, I think what's really interesting for me working in unscripted, although production shut down, the thing about unscripted is we're much more tolerant of seeing Zoom calls, of seeing adaptations on screen. So we've managed to adapt our shows. In fact, we're going to be releasing a promo soon which shows some of those adaptations that we've done. And because our broadcasters desperately need original content, they're getting more viewers than ever, but have no new shows in the can because production has stopped. Actually, we're able to adapt and make unscripted easier because it's cheaper, so the risks are less, and it's much faster turnaround. You can record 3 shows in a day, sometimes on 3 to 5, actually, depending on the territory. In some places, depending on what that quiz or studio show is. So actually, we have never been busier. We're having to change how we support it. Normally, when we sell a show, we have a team of consultants, and someone will fly out. They'll spend time prepping the production with the local teams. We have people on site helping with the first recording, and actually none of that's easy or possible at all. So we've had to find ways around that, but that doesn't stop us being creative. We're all creatives in this situation. So I think from unscripted, it's been a real I think we'll see a renaissance, and particularly because a lot of the industry is driven from the US. And in the US, if you have no one writing dramas and no one making dramas, there is a hole in the schedules that US broadcasters are looking to fill. And quite often what happens in the US does trickle its way across the world. But we also have to be really reactive. So Asia, they're ahead of the curve in COVID. We have Thailand, Shark Tank was filming last week. We couldn't be there, but they were getting on with that. But in Latin America, everything is really still very much locked down. So we have to react to all of those different circumstances across the globe. So it's made it, honestly, it's made it really exciting. And we're able to do things that we might not have got away with before, and try new things. And that is the heart of what we should be doing as TV, working in this industry.
Absolutely. At this juncture, I'd just say the one thing that I've noticed as a reporter who writes about buying and acquisitions and distribution, the distribution market has been probably the most frenetic it's ever been in the last few months, because people have had to adapt. And Jess, you can pick up from here. Obviously, what Laura said is very pertinent about Unscripted's ability to make programming and therefore get new content onto a pipeline. Drama doesn't have that as much because it's a slow-moving machine. Just from Studio Canal's perspective, what have you been doing over the last few months to kind of make sure that you still have stuff to sell and are still working, basically?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a turbulent time for the industry, for distributors, for broadcasters and producers alike. In terms of kind of how our day-to-day has changed, as you say, it's still a frenetic time for distribution. So other than working from home, it's still very much business as usual. We are having a lot more team catch-ups via video calls on top of, our usual meetings, so that we all feel connected as a team and as a business. In terms of the wider industry, we are in uncharted waters here. So I'm not sure what the long-term impact will be. I am optimistic, as Laura said. I think, we are a robust bunch and that the industry will bounce back. But in the short term, what we're doing is, like Laura said, being reactive and staying really close to our partners to make sure that we are there for them for any of their content needs. And, we're starting to see production pipelines, opening back up again. So I do think we're very robust and that we will bounce back.
Sure, absolutely. And it's something that I'm going to bring the whole panel onto a little bit later. Dan, from your perspective, obviously the buyer, the acquisitions executive is suddenly the one of the most important people in the room. And I just wanted to get your perspective on the kind of programming that has kind of come your way, and what you've been looking for maybe in the last few months to kind of make sure that those channels are shored up with programming where original programming hasn't been able to make its place because of production shutdown.
I think there's a couple of things that it's kind of made us do as a broadcaster, and made me doing my role, is it can push one way where people are locked down and want to turn to nostalgic programming and are more willing to sit down and watch Gavin and Stacey again. And when the world is in a bit of turmoil, all you want to do is watch something that's familiar and happy and friendly, and why not watch the whole of Vicar of Dibley all over again? But then what it's also done is, because there isn't that stream of content that's coming towards us, so with production shut down globally, those finished programs are not coming through. So the new series of MasterChef USA, which we usually take, but it's only halfway through production, so I can't acquire that because it's not completed yet. So what it's kind of making us do is to think a little bit more outside the box. So we always want to put more innovative content on Dave, but we kind of know what works. So we tend to stick with what we know quite a lot. But what it's done is pushed us to be a bit more inventive and put programming on the channel that we've considered before. But now we've got the opportunity to do it because we're not forced to do it, but we know that we have the opportunity to do so. So yeah, it's pushed kind of as a network for us two ways. We either comfort food or something a bit more extreme.
Yeah, and do audiences steer you with that in terms of, I mean, there is so much data associated with the industry, and obviously we have rating systems in the UK which kind of track what people watch, when people watch, what they're watching, what platforms they're watching on, that kind of thing. Has the kind of the desire for escapist content, which I personally have also seen, have reported on, escapist content is high in demand. Have audiences told you where to go in terms of
I mean, we have a big insights and research team who work constantly to kind of evaluate what people are watching and why they're watching it. There's a reason why on Friday night on Channel 4 at 10 o'clock I was watching The In-Betweeners from the beginning. I wouldn't naturally go to all four and watch The In-Betweeners from the beginning, but it was put on there on the schedule in front of me, and it was just really nice and easy to watch it instead of watching the 10 o'clock news. So yeah, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes in terms of us working out what it is that people want.
Sure, absolutely. We've touched on it there. Obviously, the situation that we find ourselves in you know, kind of foregrounded by COVID-19 has made 2020 a bit of a year of seismic change. I mean, that's about a big an understatement as I could possibly get. Particularly in the TV industry, a lot has changed in the 7 months that has been. COVID-19 has ceased all travel, meaning that Jess and Laura, who travel all over the world to different markets, distribution markets, and clients in international countries, which is obviously a very big draw of being in the distribution industry, I'm sure, have not been able to do that. Likewise, Dan won't have been able to possibly go to some of the big market events that we have in the industry. There were two specifically in Cannes called MIP TV and MIPCOM, where the likes of Jess, Laura, and Dan will all flock to the Côte d'Azur and have meetings over perhaps a glass of rosé or coffee and discuss program sales. COVID has ceased all that, and since then, you know, the global protests around you know the sprung from the problem of diversity and injustice in the world has also been felt in the TV industry more pertinently than ever before, and our conversation has changed. I just want to get your perspective for the next generation of TV distributors and the people who are in this audience who might go into the industry, and we hope will do go into the industry. What will the future of distribution look like for each of you? You know, what are the key things the key points that we can harness and then take forward into the next generation?
So I guess from my point of view, the first thing to say is that I think that sometimes a pause can be a good thing, and that this is an opportunity to maybe reassess what our priorities are in the industry. Whilst a big draw is the travel, for me, I think it's an enormous privilege to travel internationally and to meet people internationally. That's certainly why I love being in sales. I won't be doing that. I cannot see that coming back to the same level as it was before. I certainly don't think there'll be no travel, but it will be far more limited, and quite rightly so. We do have to rethink how we do that. So I do think, but I think we are learning how to use this technology better so that we drive those relationships remotely, and I think that we can definitely do that, and we've been forced to explore that, for instance, on the production consultancy side, and I don't think there's a reason why we can't do that to a large extent on the sales side. But just on the issue of diversity, I think that this is a genuinely great example of being able to push up the agenda, something that is really important for the industry. There are a huge amount of literature and research out there which shows that genuinely diverse industries perform better. They're better placed to be successful. And diversity has always been on the agenda, certainly here at Sony, but it maybe wasn't at the top. And I absolutely think it is at the pretty much the top thing on our CEO's list at the moment. We've had several, you know, calls about it, and there are plenty of actions on that. I think for the people watching this who are starting out in the industry, I'd like to think that it's a good time to be starting out. I think that industries are really aware of making entry-level jobs particularly really open. And what I hope is that as they go up the ladder, they will not face the same difficulties of progressing that sometimes that we still haven't got right yet. So our senior management, I don't think it's any they would disagree, is not diverse, and they're looking to change that. But we really need a pipeline. We need to change how we mentor people through the industry to make sure that we don't lose great people from whatever backgrounds they come from.
Absolutely, absolutely, a really important point. And Jess, if you'd like to just you know, expand on that and say what you feel, what you hope for the distribution landscape in response to what Laura's just said.
Yeah, I think we've reached, you know, critical mass, and diversity and representation are now issues that can't be ignored. And as individuals, as a business, as an industry, we, condemn any acts of racism, cruelty, or intolerance. And it's important to remember that we can cure this ourselves by making conscious efforts to fight that, inequality whenever we see it. And I know all across the industry, and certainly at Studio Canal, positive measures and steps have been put in place to actively address this. And at Studio Canal, we've created the Racial Equality Network of Studio Canal employees to make recommendations to the business about how it can better reflect and understand their concerns, and to look at those issues that are related to diversity and inclusion, and to make sure that these members of our team have a voice, have an input on how, which I think is, strides ahead in the right direction.
Absolutely. And Dan, from your perspective and UK's perspective, how are you facing this, the dual issue of COVID-19 changing the way we work, and the importance of changing the fabric of the industry to make it more diverse, to make it more inclusive, and from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, on the COVID-19 issue, obviously all of us are working from home at the moment. I haven't been to the office for the past 3 months. What it kind of means is, like, I think it was Laura who said earlier, that relationships are kind of the most important part of the job. So it's really important that my relationships with producers and distributors are maintained, and where we'll usually have like an hour-long face-to-face meeting and get to know each other, which kind of builds that relationship and makes you taking programming all the more easier. What I'm finding is I'm having more regular catch-ups with people that are much shorter. So I'll have a phone call with someone for 5 minutes, and kind of that would be maybe a couple of times.
To the attendees of this panel, apologies for that interlude. This is the first time I've been asked to chair a Zoom webinar, so it's going fantastically well, I must say. But we're going to pick up exactly where we were left off with Dan had started discussing about the issues facing UK TV in terms of what we do post-COVID, and is going to also talk a bit about the issues around diversity in the industry and how that pertains to UK TV and what their strategy is. So Dan, if you'd like to try and recalibrate.
Yes, I'll pick up on the diversity issue. There's two things. One is being able to change things on screen, and the other is being able to change things off screen. Now, in terms of off screen, what UK TV is doing, it's got an initiative called UK TV's All Voices, which helps new entrants and kind of mid-level people who are going back into work, maybe they've been on maternity leave or looked after kids, and they get the opportunity to work on UK TV Original, so in our commissioning department, on a 12-month kind of placement. So that is available on UK TV's website if you want to have a look at that. And then the other thing in terms of on-screen is that we need to make sure that everyone internally is doing their thing to make a positive change. Now, with lots of programming, certainly for me, acquisitions, it's tough because we're acquiring programs that have already been made. Only Fools and Horses is what it is. It's very hard, or impossible, in fact, to have an impact on that in terms of the program. The only impact that I can have is what I was discussing earlier with pre-sales. So often we get pitched history programs where all of the experts are white, middle-aged, middle-class men. And I always go back to people and say, you need to try harder in terms of having a more diverse range of people who are the experts in this program. Not every single mechanical engineer or every single historian is a white, middle-class, middle-aged man. Like, we all need to try harder and push each other to have these types of issues at the forefront so that we can actively see changes on screen.
Absolutely, absolutely. All really pertinent points. And from my perspective as a journalist, it is something that is, and which I report about, daily. It is really gratifying to see the dial is moving now. It's terrible that in 2020, certain parts of the industry are so far behind in representation and diversity, and it's something that is thankfully now being addressed with a concerted manner rather than on an ad hoc basis or a bolt-on situation. So to effect real change, this is a moment to take it on forward in the industry. You've touched on that, how distribution is going to be different, hopefully in the future. But now it would be really interesting to get your perspectives, my panelists, about getting into distribution. Obviously, distribution is a part of the industry which is fundamental. I mean, we all talk about program making and making, wonderful dramas and brilliant game shows and documentaries that win Emmys and stuff, and that's very important. But getting that out to the world and buying that so that audiences can go is also do it. So I just wanted to, find out your advice for getting in. Perhaps you can give an indication of the kind of what the entry level jobs are in your various companies, or what even the job titles are, because the TV world is full of strange job titles. So maybe if we start with Jess in terms of your advice to the audience for getting in, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. If you want to get into sales, the type of roles, in terms of nuts and bolts, the job titles you're looking for are as a sales coordinator, an admin assistant, or a team assistant within a sales team. And, always be on the lookout for opportunities to learn more and upskill yourself. And, make meaningful connections when you are exposed to different people, throughout your experiences. And also, I think it's really important to get to know the industry, read the trades, read the press every day, watch as much content as you can across the spectrum. And, have a look at what the channels have on in their schedules. Read the TV guides. I still read the TV guides every week. And, and by doing all of that, you really will immerse yourself in the research and in the industry, and you'll get an understanding for, is this industry right for you, or which part of the industry do you want to get into and, build your career there.
Yeah, and maybe Dan before Laura, because we have two distributors and one acquisitions exec, and let's break it up a bit.
I think I've got 2 points really. One is that use those tiny connections that you have. So I didn't know a single person who worked in TV. I'm from Hull. There's nobody from Hull who's ever worked in TV before. Like, I knew that I needed to be in London in order to make it, and then I applied for that one little internship, and from there everything rolls on. Even if it's just messaging someone on LinkedIn that you're interested in the business that they work for, like even those tiny things, like we're all quite nice people, I hope, and would take the time to help people out. Because the other thing is that if you're watching a TV program, because distribution is such like a hidden world, I think for people who aren't in the TV business, if you're watching a TV program and at the end, have a look at what the credits are, and we'll always say distributed by, and all these businesses that you've never heard of before, you'll then be able to go on their websites, find out who works there, find out what people do, what their job titles are, and kind of gain a bit more of an understanding of the world, so that then when you can see jobs that come up and kind of have more of an understanding of it all.
Sure, absolutely. And Laura?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with what Jess and Dan have already said. And for me, I think the key thing was actually ending up at a tiny indie cellar door, because I really got to know, you're so close to every single decision that happens there. And I was able to, learn about the production side, the marketing, the PR, the business side. So you're really immersed in it. So whilst it is amazing working for Sony, and it's a fantastic opportunities, and there are plenty of them, we have a great internship, etc. Don't forget about the smaller companies, because actually some of those smaller indies, and there are lots of them, you can really, really get to know the totality of the distribution industry and all the players in it, and really get to explore what you particularly like about it. And to Jess's point, it's about doing the job that you're there for, whether it's as a receptionist, a runner, team assistant, whatever that is, to the best of your ability and more, because it is fiercely competitive. because the rewards are great when you break through and you start to move up.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, Laura, that I worked for some very small production companies, and often you're working on things. So I did lots of kind of corporate jobs. So you're creating video for like an awards ceremony or for like some weird kind of gig thing that's going on at a company. And although you're like, this is not TV, like why this? So I'm not making TV, but all the experience that you're gaining from that, all then contributes going forward. I learned how to use a camera. I learned how to edit on After Effects. I learned how to do so many different things, doing those small little jobs in the beginning. And I guess giving yourself time to learn everything and not expect everything to come at once is,
yeah. And actually those people that you work with there will end up in different places too.
Yeah,
So it's about broadening your network as well, and also just learning the language of it. You'll pick up things as you immerse yourself in whatever area you're in. And actually now, just to the point that this is a very fast moving industry, when I started, there was no Netflix, there was no Amazon, there was no YouTube. So look for what's coming next, because it will come fast, and that won't necessarily be where you expect it. So it's being really, to Jess's point, really reading what's going on and hearing about the trends and trying to spot where that is, because your first job might not be an obvious TV job, but it might end up being in an entertainment role.
Yeah, I just to point to that, I would recommend looking out for original series on TikTok. Now that they've got the new Disney boss, I can definitely see original stories and programming coming to TikTok. Watch that space. We've got time for some questions, and there have been some really good questions. In fact, one that leads directly from what you've just been talking about, getting in. It's a really pertinent question. One of our audience members has asked, if you want to make the move into sales and distribution, but come from an editorial background, what transferable skills do you look for to make that transition? I know that you probably touched on a few of these anyway, but from an editorial side to distribution and acquisitions, if we could get those, what transferable skills do you look for to make that step?
I mean, I guess the key thing that you have as in an editorial position is knowledge of content, and just being really immersed in the content and and loving content and loving TV. That is an enormous step forward. I also think that being able to deconstruct and understand how it's put together is certainly in my business and formats. That's a really great thing to be able to talk to. What are the themes? What things can you notice about it? So I think knowledge of content, we have training sessions still for our sales execs at Sony to make sure they understand content, because that is what it's all about, heart and emotion. And as an editor, you probably don't realize how far along the way you are on that. And that is effectively what's going to persuade someone like Dan. It's going to be there's a great deal of emotional decision making in pushing people over into buying.
And Jess, do you want to quickly add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as Laura said, content is at the heart of what we do. And if you're already immersed in that world, that's a strength for you. You can't manufacture a passion or an interest in that. So that genuine interest in content is already there. So I would say, build on your personal skills. As I said, a big part of what we do in sales is building relationships. So, that's something to work on and build on. And also your analytical skills. More and more data is becoming really important for us. Distribution models are getting, bigger and bigger. So any kind of data or analytics you have to go in when you're pitching content to prove it has been, the formula is a success, will help you. So kind of to brush up on your data analytics skills as well, I think is a good place to start.
Sure. This next question could probably go to both Laura and Jess, but I think it's more in given what we've been discussed at Laura in terms of formats. When you are looking, you've discussed it, when you're looking to kind of work with different territories to to rework a format such as Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or Dragon's Den, who is it that you work with in those territories to get that brand into that country, but so it's also recognized globally? And I suppose that involves not just the broadcasters who you want to maybe sell it to, but also the independent producers who might want to option that
Absolutely.
format.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no one answer to this. So we might be talking to a local producer because of they're really passionate about it, but they know that to pitch it to their local broadcasters, they're going to have to make some changes. So it might be the first instances that you're talking with the local producer to talk about those changes. If it's a broadcaster, then it could be someone in acquisitions, but it's more likely to be a program, a commissioner, or someone who is probably in charge of the actual content on screen. So, but it just depends. In smaller countries, sometimes that's just one person who does all of it. In bigger countries, it could be 10 people that you have to convince, and it's much more of a committee thing. So what's great for us is that our brands are now so evolved, is that we've got a whole bank of those scenarios that we can roll out. And when that bank's empty, then we have to get our thinking caps on and go, right, okay, we start again. And that's what keeps it alive. So we really rely on our international partners to push us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great advice. Jess, I've got a very specific question to you, and it sounds a lot like rights negotiation and windowing. So please take it. It's a very, very detailed question. The asker could definitely work for broadcast if they wanted to. So Jess, how do you sell premium drama to channels in other countries? And she's asking, for example, the show Versailles, which was broadcast on BBC Two. Did the BBC pitch for the rights to show it? Was it made with the BBC in mind? Or did they see it when it's finished? How do you negotiate that with channels? I think broadly the question is, how does a show get sold to a broadcaster through either sales or whether it's a commission? I think talk through those two processes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can't talk too much to that specific example of Versailles, but generally a show, the idea will be born inside a particular broadcaster, and then in order to make the distribution model work, a distributor is appointed to sell the show internationally. So for us at Studio Canal, our position in the marketplace as an integrated producer, distributor, broadcaster, with our parent company being Canal Plus over in Paris. Any kind of creation original which is commissioned by Canal Plus, so something like Spiral, we would automatically get the distribution rights to take to market. And then you would, roll out your sales strategy. So you would look at key markets, as Dan and Laura have said. The global market tends to be led by what's happening in the US or the UK. So securing a solid, and the right partner for the show in those territories tends to stabilize the rest of the global marketplace. And then you would, go out there and agree those deals. The commissioning broadcaster will retain the premiere rights because it is their show, so they'll tend to go first. But more and more with the advent of these global streamers, having day and day rights is really important to international broadcasters. Usually with drama, broadcasters will want to broadcast the show in their territory as close to the premiere broadcast in the home territory. So there's a little bit of juggling there to make sure that that all happens smoothly, but that is kind of the ideal scenario.
And to the person who asked that show in particular, Versailles, is sold by a company called Banijay Rights, of whom Jess, Laura and Daniel will have many colleagues and peers and clients in. The third question I've got, it probably can be answered by everyone, and I want to get Dan on here as well. It's if you have a new and creative game show format, what advice would you give to a network to secure the green light and then build it into a global show? So I expect this is kind of the stuff that Laura has to do on a daily basis in format stuff, but it could also be, you know, from Dan's perspective as in acquisitions, you know, commissioning, you will see ideas, examples of getting pitches and turning that into a show to get a green light on UK TV, and then maybe getting that sold internationally as a format. Who wants to go first? Maybe Laura, and then Dan.
Sure.
Well, just quickly, because it is really something that Dan will be able to speak to, but my experience and what we always say, not everything is a format, but what you have to do is you must commission locally. You can't go out and say, I'm going to make an international show. You have to really, you'll just lose all of the creative heart of a show if you don't do that. So we always encourage our production companies that are constantly coming up with new ideas and pitching to their local markets, whether it's UK, China, Australia, France, Germany, wherever it is, they must get a show that is going to work for their local channel, and then we will come in and say, okay, is it a format? If it is, great, we'll take it out. If not, can we tweak it so that we can take it out? But it's probably something that Dan has more experience in.
Mm.
I mean, yeah, talking about format specifically, so we acquire, I keep going back to MasterChef, but it's on my brain because we're launching MasterChef Australia next month. We work with the distributor and the producers to make sure that we have everything that we need in order to promote the show. So we would try and get access to the talent and make sure that, yeah, we have everything that makes the show launch as best as it can. Yeah, I don't necessarily have.
Yeah, I think if it doesn't launch well on a home network, you're never going to sell it. It's just so hard to launch anything if it has roll out anything that hasn't had a successful launch, because it's just too much competition. So absolutely. Yeah,
I mean that's one thing that I think you can all testify, the importance of local content before trying to sell it globally is the matter, because if it has a success on a domestic broadcaster, that's a ready-made example of success to be then to sell to territories and broadcasters around the world.
Yes, exactly.
Brilliant, fantastic. Well, I mean, that's all the questions I've seen in my little document, in my little docket. Thank you so much for joining us. Firstly, the audience. I hope you've had some fantastic insight. I've had some fantastic insight, and I've been writing about this for the last 4 or 5 years. So this has been fantastic for me. And I just wanted to say thank you once again to my panelists, Laura, Jess, and Dan, for coming on to this this call. It's been great to hear your insight, and yeah, fingers crossed, hopefully that will have encouraged a load of people to go into distribution and acquisitions. It'd be great to see you guys in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you too. It's been really fun to do.